All human life unfolds on the stage of Mother Nature, and Taylor Sheridan is one of the few modern storytellers who still lets us feel that. Welcome to Sinikkanalysis. Here, we explore pop culture, film, television, and media through a deeper lens. If deeper analysis of pop culture, media, and human nature interests you, join the tribe. We release a new analysis every Sunday. What interests me about Taylor Sheridan is not cowboy authenticity. I'm not a cowboy, I'm not a rancher, I'm not trying to decide whether his worlds are a perfect reflection of ranch culture or the American West in some final sense. What interests me is something else. I'm interested in why his work feels so powerful to watch. I am interested in the shadow inside his characters, the emotional atmosphere of his stories, and above all, the way nature functions almost like a main character. Because when I watch Taylor Sheridan's work, I do not only watch for plot, I watch for the land, the silence, the sky, the rhythm, the way the natural world changes the emotional experience of the story. In his worlds, the nature is not a decoration, it is presence. And I think that is one of the main reasons why his work resonates so deeply right now. I also want to acknowledge something important. Television is never the work of a one human alone. Sheridan may be the central creative force as a writer, creator, and a producer, but these worlds are collaborative. Directors shape the emotional language of the image. Actors make grief, fear, pride, repression, and tenderness physically real. Cinematographers, editors, sound designers, costume, hair, makeup, extras, runners, all of them help bring a story into form. I say that not only out of politeness, but from a lived experience. I have worked in many productions myself, including productions connected to Disney and Netflix, and I have seen how much labor it takes to build even one scene. Sometimes a scene takes the entire day. You see how many people are needed to create a world that on screen may only last few minutes. A production like Titanic would not be Titanic without the extras, without the makeup artists, without the costume teams, without the people holding the whole environment together. So when I speak about Sheridan, I also want to honor the collaborative body through which these stories become visible. That feels especially true with the Madison. Sheridan may shape the world on page, but Kristen Navarros helps that world breathe on screen. The way nature feels like a witness, a container, a quiet emotional presence is not only in the writing, it is also in the direction. Still, what Sheridan brings back into modern storytelling is not just drama, he brings back reality. And by reality, I do not only mean conflict, grief, violence, or power. I also mean the living world, land, weather, animals, body, consequence. In so much contemporary visual culture, we are surrounded by overstimulation. Great buildings, artificial interiors, speed, noise, glass, steel, fluorescent light. Even emotionally intense stories can feel detached from the physical world. Sheridan's work feels different because place matters. When I watch Yellowstone, Landman, or the Madison, I can feel how the environment itself affects the nervous system. The openness of the land, the horses, the mountains, the silence, the horizon, the weather. It is not just beautiful, it is regulating. It reminds the body of scale. And that matters because nature in these stories does not only look beautiful, it feels like love, a vast holding, a field large enough to receive what human beings themselves often cannot process. Mother Nature's love is immense. Despite everything human beings do, extraction, pollution, greed, violence, forgetfulness, nature still carries life. She still feeds. She still receives. She still feeds. She still holds. She's so abundant. And maybe that touches something so deeply because we are not separate from nature in the first place. We are part of it. Our veins resemble the branching lines of leaves. Our ear curves like a shell. A brain resembles a walnut. The same intelligence that shapes roots, rivers, bark, bone, blood, and breath is moving through us too. We are not outside this world looking in. We are expressions of it. To me, we are consciousness experiencing a physical form for a brief moment. We are an awareness inside of a body that can touch, taste, smell, hear, and see existence from within, and perhaps that is why land, water, sky, and silence can affect us so deeply. They soften the illusion of separation. I think a lot of the suffering comes from that illusion. We forget that we are not separate from this place. We begin to live as if reality is outside of us, against us, or there only to serve us, but often reality is mirroring us. It reflects what we carry, what we repress, what we refuse to face, and many people do not want to look because truly looking would require change. This is the part that makes Sheridan's world feel psychologically alive to me. They do not only show human conflict, they place that conflict inside a reality that reflects it. That is why I find him compelling as a writer. He writes people with shadow in them. His characters are wounded, proud, repressed, territorial, controlling, grieving, fiercely loyal, deeply damaged, and sometimes unexpectedly tender. Even when I disagree with his choices, I can still feel that he is touching something real. And I do disagree with some of his choices. For example, in Landman, the framing of the daughter felt unnecessary to me. If the character is meant to be 17, then it is fair to question why is she being framed through such sexualized lens. To me, that slips into male gaze territory and weakens the maturity of the storytelling. But that too is part of the analysis. Sometimes the artist's own blind spots become part of what the work exposes. If I look at Sheridan through Yellowstone, Landman, and the Madison, I see 3 different relationships between human beings and reality. In Yellowstone, the land is tied to inheritance, identity, family trauma, control, and the fear of erasure. Beneath the family drama, there is old pain still rotting in the walls. The land is not neutral there. It carries memory, burden, violence, and continuity. In Landman, the land becomes an extraction. It is tied to industry, money, depletion, pressure, and systems built on use. The world feels harder, more transactional, more fractured. The shadow there is not only personal but systemic. In the Madison, the land becomes a witness of grief. Nature feels less like a battlefield and more like an emotional container. It gives sorrow room to breathe. And one of the most beautiful examples of that is Preston. What moved me so much in the Madison was that this man, wealthy, privileged, living a life of access, Manhattan, private jets, all the markers of worldly success, still had a soul-level relationship to the land. In his journal, what feels so meaningful is not relationship in the capitalist sense, but reverence. His task is not to conquer the land, but to leave it in such a condition that it looks as though he had never ever been there. That is such a beautiful form of respect. To be there and not impose yourself. To love the land but not dominate it. To move through nature without needing to discard with your ego. That to me is one of the deepest spiritual notes in the Madison. And this also opens into something bigger. Sovereignty. Because many people today would not survive in nature without the system. They would not know what to eat, how to make fire, how to prepare food without electricity, how to identify what can nourish and what can kill. So much basic relationship to the living world has been forgotten. And when we become too dependent on systems that feed us, heat us, and sustain us, we also hand over a certain kind of power. And of course, I understand the luxury of modern life. I like living in the city too. I like that I don't have to walk for water. I like that I can open a tap and filter my water. That is a privilege. But I also think it matters to remain conscious of what has been lost, because in nature, responsibility returns to the self. There's a form of sovereignty there. And that tension matters in Sheridan's work. That is also why the phrase nature holds grief feels so true to me across all three stories. Yellowstone holds generational shadow, Landman holds the shadow of extraction, the Madison holds grief in a more tender form, but in all three, nature becomes a silent ground that receives what human beings themselves often cannot fully carry. The land, the sky, the water, the silence, they do not erase shadow, but they hold it. They try to ground it. And this is also where the indigenous presence in Yellowstone becomes so important, not because the series offers simple answers, but because it keeps opening a deeper question. Do human beings really own the land, or have we forgotten how to live with it? That tension, land as property versus land as living relation, runs through Sheridan's work. Modern capitalist culture asks, what can we take from the earth? But a deeper relationship asks, how can we remain in right relationship with it? That is why Sheridan's storytelling feels bigger than family drama or Western mythology to me. Beneath the conflict lies a question about our broken relationship to the living world. And that is also why I want to briefly acknowledge 8083 and 1923, even though I'm not focusing on them in depth here. Sheridan's Yellowstone prequels carry the same emotional and spiritual relationship to land, history, suffering, and survival. They deserve their own analysis. Sheridan's own storytelling philosophy seems to reflect this deeper current too. He does not seem interested in handing the viewer polished answers. He builds a world strong enough to leave the viewer with questions. And perhaps that is what gives his work its truth pill quality. Not because he preaches, but because he lets contradiction remain visible. He lets beauty sit beside violence. He lets grief sit beside pride. He lets people love something while also destroying it. And then he leaves the audience inside that tension. To me, that is powerful storytelling. So no, my interest in Taylor Sheridan is not based on whether he is flawless or whether every part of his world is perfectly accurate. It is based on the fact that he brings back something many modern stories have lost: land as presence, nature as witness, environment as psychology, and reality as something that still has the power to confront the human ego. That is what I feel when I watch his work. Not just plot, not just character, but the return of something older. A world where silence still exists, where land still matters, where grief is not rushed, and where nature, despite everything, still keeps holding us. Thank you for listening to Sinikkanalysis. I'll see you again next Sunday.